In this module, we begin dealing with our first metaphysical primacy issue, reality and God. In order to discuss the primacy issue of reality-God, we need to first add a tool to our toolbox called an ontological framework. So what is ontology? The origin of the word ontology comes from the Greek ontos, being, and logia, study, the branch of metaphysics that studies the nature or existence of being. An ontological framework, then, is the implicit, unstated, or given conditions of its being, out of which everything else arises. A philosophical theory is ultimately bound by the construct of its ontological framework. As an example, here are three ontological frameworks, each of which gives rise to different activities or states of existence. For example, consider golfing, consider kayaking, and snowboarding. The ontological framework for the golfer is the golf course. For the kayaking, it is the river and rapids, and for the snowboarder, it is the mountains and snow. As a result, three different sets of skills are required, as well as different sports equipment, such as a kayak, a golf cart, golf clubs, or a snowboard. Notice that it is the actual ontological framework that sets the terms for the type of sport that one is engaging in. In other words, the ontological framework has primacy over the activity. What happens if you mix up the ontological frameworks? Getting the ontological framework wrong can have disastrous consequences. You get comical and potentially deadly consequences, such as the foolishness, if not suicidal, attempt to take one's golf cart down the river. It is just as nonsensical to show up on the golf course to play golf with your snowboard as you sweat in your winter clothing, or to pack your golf clubs on your back down the ski slopes. A far more comprehensive ontological framework would be the earth itself, and greater yet, the universe as a whole. A philosophical theory is ultimately bound by the construct of its ontological framework. The restored gospel of Jesus Christ has a particular ontological framework out of which the entire plan of salvation emerges, and that is the entire universe. When we say universe, we mean all existing matter and space considered as a great whole. So which ontological framework should Eternalism study? Eternalism's ontological framework contains all that is, was, or ever will be. President Brigham Young described Eternalism's comprehensive claims when he said, "How much of Mormonism is true? All of it. How much does it embrace? All the truth there is in the heavens, on the earth, under the earth, and if there is any truth in hell, this doctrine claims it. Yes, if there is a truth among the ungodly and wicked, it belongs to us, and if there is a truth in hell, it is ours. The philosophy of the heavens and the earth, of the worlds that are, that were, and that are yet to come into existence, is all in the gospel that we have embraced. Mormonism embraces all truth, that is revealed, that is unrevealed, whether religious, political, scientific, or philosophical. In our day, there are three major ontological frameworks competing for our allegiance, only one of which Eternalism declares to be true. We will go through each of them. What do you think about learning about competing or false philosophies? The objectivist Ayn Rand said, "The battle of philosophers is a battle for man's mind. If you do not understand their theories, you are vulnerable to the worst among them." Leonard Peikoff further said, "If you are to fight these errors, you have to know the main arguments advanced in favor of them. You have to hear the devil's case, so to speak, presented as strongly as his case permits. You have to be sure you know on each issue what really is true and what is wrong with the arguments advanced for the erroneous position." Stephen E. Robinson said, "The real sticking point is not what the LDS think of Christ and his gospel, but rather the different ontological frame or view of the nature of the universe into which Mormons fit the gospel. It is this broader doctrinal framework into which the Latter-day Saints place the basic gospel of Christ rather than the LDS understanding of the gospel itself that generates the most opposition from non-Mormons." As we go through these three major ontological frameworks, the following items will be discussed in each framework. This symbol we will use to represent God. This symbol we will use to represent mankind. This symbol we will use to represent the universe. First, we'll look at the three great monotheistic religions, that is, traditional Christian, Judaic, and Islamic. They picture the universe as a box. Where do they put God? The three great monotheistic religions place God outside of the box. God being outside of reality, he then creates reality ex nihilo, meaning out of nothing. Where do they put man? They put man inside the box or inside of reality. This is what we call the absolutism of God or primacy of consciousness, where man is inside reality and God is somehow outside of reality. Next, let's analyze Greek or pagan mythology. They too have the universe pictured as a box. Where do they put God? They put their gods inside the box. Where do they put man? They put man inside the box. This is what we call the absolutism of reality or primacy of existence. God being inside of reality, he then creates reality ex materia, meaning out of already existing element. Next, let us analyze Eastern mysticism. They too picture the universe as a box. Where do they put God? For them, God is the box. Where do they put man? They put man inside the box. This is called pantheism, or identifying God as the universe with various doctrines such as reincarnation. Pantheism doesn't have a consistent set of primacy issues. This is what we call mixed premises. Now let's ask some key questions regarding each of these ontological frameworks. In the God outside the box model, what is man's incentive? In this model, man's incentive is to get out of the box. The box is painful, restrictive, and keeping us away from God. This leads to asceticism and transcendence of the great apostasy. In other words, the self-denial of the evils of existence. Think of monks heading out into the wilderness to live in solitude away from the evil world. Think of doctrines such as celibacy and priests mortifying the flesh. In the God inside the box model, what is man's incentive? In this model, man's incentive is to get along with the box. That is, learn the rules of reality so you can master the environment and progress to become like God. In other words, abide by the rules of reality and abound in existence. In the God is the box model, what is man's incentive? In this model, man's incentive is to literally lose oneself. In other words, have no more personal identity and become physically one with the box. This then means extreme oblivion or nirvana, and poof, self-identity is gone away. Which model does the restored gospel of Jesus Christ follow? The restoration follows the ontology of God inside the box. That is, God is inside of reality just the same as mankind. All of the doctrines of the restoration belong in the God inside the box model. The ontology of God outside the box, or God outside of reality, is essentially the abomination Joseph Smith was told about. All of the doctrines of the great apostasy belong in the God outside the box ontology. It is precisely these two differing ontological frameworks that make up the opposing theologies of both the great apostasy and the Latter-day Saint restoration. Both refer to the same historical Jesus, but not to the same ontological Jesus. Any attempt to minimize the significance of these ontological differences is missing the point that describes the historical Christian doctrine of the Trinity versus the God of the first vision. These opposing ontological perspectives are described concisely with the following quotes. The evangelical theologian Donald Bloch described historical Christianity's God outside the box perspective when he said, "In order to find God, man must rise above the realm of the material, where evil resides, and ascend to the realm of pure spirit. Salvation lies outside of time, history, and corporeality. The sovereign God of the Bible cannot be put in a box." Elder Bruce R. McConkie described the Restoration's God inside the box perspective when he said, "The truth pertaining to him is that he is our Father in heaven, that he has a body of flesh and bones as tangible as man's, that he is a literal person, and that if we believe and obey his laws, we can gain the exaltation that he possesses. Now that is the greatest truth and the most glorious concept known to human mind, and the reverse of it is the greatest heresy in all Christendom. The Christian heresy, where God is concerned, is that deity is a spirit essence that fills the immensity of space, that he is three beings in one, that he is uncreated, incorporeal, and incomprehensible, that he is without body, parts, or passions, that he is a spirit nothingness, that he is everywhere and nowhere in particular present. These are concepts written in the creeds had in the churches of the world. Did you know Joseph Smith said there was a great secret associated with the Restoration? What do you think this secret is? Joseph Smith, in his King Follett Discourse, said, "If the veil were rent today, and the great God who holds this world in its orbit, and who upholds all worlds and all things by his power, was to make himself visible, I say, if you were to see him today, you would see him like a man in form, like yourselves, in all the person, image, and very form as a man. We have imagined and supposed that God was God from all eternity. I will refute that idea and take away the veil so that you may see. There are but a very few beings in the world who understand rightly the character of God. God himself was once as we are now, and is an exalted man, and sits enthroned in yonder heavens. That is the great secret. In other words, Joseph Smith is describing a God inside the box. President Lorenzo Snow said this succinctly when he said, "As man now is, God once was. As God now is, man may be." Elder Orson Pratt said, "The true God exists both in time and in space, and has as much relation to them as man or any other being. He has extension and form and dimension, as well as man. He occupies space, has a body, parts, and passions." The Book of Mormon prophet Lehi spoke of opposition in all things, so knowing what we stand for automatically tells us what we stand against. Joseph Fielding McConkie said it this way, "Anytime we declare something to be true, we have picked a fight with that which is untrue." Regarding mixed premises, the objectivist philosopher Leonard Peikoff said, "Philosophically, the arbitrary is worse than the false. The false has a relation, albeit negative, to the facts of reality. The arbitrary, however, has no relation to evidence or context. Neither term, therefore, true or false, can be applied to it." In a previous module, we described Eternalism's three axioms: existence, consciousness, and identity. Let's analyze these three ontological frameworks to see if they violate any of the axioms. God outside the box violates the existence and identity axioms. The doctrine of creatio ex nihilo breaks the existence axiom by stating that existence was created out of non-existence. The doctrine of supernatural miracles breaks the identity axiom by claiming causeless effects based on non-identifiable, non-explainable supernaturalism. Being philosophers, theologians, and consistent thinkers, we cannot accept an ontology that has contradictions. God is the box also violates the existence and identity axioms, but in a slightly different way. Eastern mysticism claims the entire universe is one big consciousness, which confounds existence and consciousness as being the same thing. The concept of yin and yang embraces contradictions, thus destroying identity by declaring something can both be A and not A at the same time. Being philosophers, theologians, and consistent thinkers, we cannot accept an ontology that embraces contradictions. Mixed premises are not consistent and cannot be analyzed as being true or false. The willful God outside the box leaves everyone interpreting God in their own way. This was the trouble that Joseph Smith experienced when he ran into various preachers, all describing the attributes of God differently. In the God outside the box ontology, the question becomes, which version of God? It took a personal visit from God to show Joseph Smith the correct version of God is in the form of a man, just like us, God inside the box. Eternalism will continue to develop the truth that you don't get to choose between these ontologies. Reality is absolute and forces itself upon you, and you only put yourself in danger by falsely choosing one of the other false ontologies. Theological discussions about God have wrestled for centuries with what is called the logical problem of evil. The question pointing out the apparent logical contradiction with the nature of evil goes like this: soaked as it is with human suffering and moral evil, how is it possible that our world is the work of an almighty, perfectly loving Creator? David Hume further defined the problem of evil when he said, "Why is there any misery at all in the world? Not by chance, surely. From some cause then. Is it from the attention of deity? But he is perfectly benevolent. Is it contrary to his intention? But he is almighty." In other words, if God created everything ex nihilo out of nothing, then he is the one primarily responsible for the evil we see around us. Logically, it follows that anyone who creates evil must themselves be evil. A second contradiction arising from the problem of evil involves the atonement of Christ. Why would an absolute God, who created reality from nothing, according to his own will, and consequently could change reality according to his own will, require his Son to be murdered to pay the price for evil doings of everyone else? Doesn't an atonement seem unnecessary and cruel for an absolute God who could just change reality whenever he wanted to? Why require the murder of his Son to cover the problem he himself created and could will to be otherwise? Eternalism's answer to the problem of evil is that the apparent contradiction only exists within a false, God outside the box ontology where God is declared to be absolute and outside of reality. In the God inside the box ontology of eternalism, reality is absolute, and therefore God didn't create evil. Evil being uncreated and in the nature of reality itself is how God can be blameless. Eternal laws being part of reality itself, independent of God, explains the need for justice to be paid with Christ's atonement. Christ's atonement only makes reasonable sense if there are laws in reality that even God cannot change by willing reality to be different than it is. President Brigham Young clearly described this idea when he said, "The principle of falsehood and wickedness, the power of the devil and the power of death are also from eternity to eternity. When truth comes, error comes also." Eternalism is both a philosophy and a theology. Which has primacy, theology or philosophy? It depends on the ontological nature of God, man, and the universe. In a God outside-the-box ontology, theology has primacy over philosophy because God is absolute. In a God inside-the-box ontology, philosophy has primacy over theology because reality is absolute. Elder John Widtsoe said, "The gospel of Jesus Christ comprehends all other knowledge. It is the philosophy that explains the whole of man's relationship to the universe. It invites the deepest study and severest scrutiny." He also said, Joseph Smith departed from the notion that God is a being foreign to nature and wholly superior to it. Instead, he taught that God is a part of nature and superior to it only in the sense that the electrician is superior to the current that is transmitted along the wire. The great laws of nature are immutable, and even God cannot transcend them. Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe to the Christian Eternalism YouTube channel and visit www.christianeternalism.org.